They treated the servicemen really, really nice, and a lot of people would take you home for dinners, you know, and there in Chicago, and they were good to you.
And as a sergeant, I had machine guns. Used to be able to take them apart and put them back together blindfold.
I was in the open. Of course, everybody was in the open on that island. And as I raised my shovel full of sand like this, a sniper shot the shovel right out of my hand.
Hello, I'm Tom Carey. Across our nation, Americans are participating in the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. The mission of this valuable project is to gather first-hand accounts of U.S. veterans from the wars and conflicts of the 20th century. I would like to thank all of the World War II veterans who shared their stories with my 5th grade social studies classes. It is through your eyes that we may vividly experience one of our nation's most difficult times.
Today is Wednesday, April 6th, 2005, and with us are Robert Ray, Matthew LaFontaine, Mr. Tom Carey, Mr. Chris Niss, Mrs. Jane Van Den Anden, and Mr. Thad Davidson. We're talking today to Mr. Garwood Hardy.
I was born in a small town called Bryan, Ohio, and Williams County. However, I did spend some time in Findlay, Ohio, and I left Findlay, Ohio when I was a sophomore in high school to go back to my hometown area. My father was in the meat business. He was in the meat business for 40 years. He done retail and wholesale meat processing and so on. And there was 3 boys and 1 girl, and we all graduated from school, and I left for the Marine Corps just at the end of my senior year in time to get the training and go into combat. My family, my mother was a wonderful cook. My dad was a hard worker. Most of his life was during the Depression. I lived during that period of time, and I used to complain about hard times, but I found out it's a wonderful thing to have hard times. I began to love sports more than school. However, when I got into my senior year, I began to love history real well. And I done a lot better with my grades. But I participated in a lot of sports: football, basketball, and track, baseball, which really kind of helped me in my military life. But I found out that it's real important to have a good education for everything. Who was a favorite teacher? He was a coach. And he taught math, algebra, and so on. And he was tough.
Did you have a job or a business before you went into the service? What was it like?
Well, all of us kids had to earn our own money. So we'd sell newspapers on the street. We'd do whatever we could to make a nickel or dime, because a nickel or dime back then was kind of a lot of money. Raking leaves. Of course, we had our chores at home to do. How old was I when I went in the Marine Corps? I just turned 20.
And what branch?
United States Marine Corps. Well, it was the period of time that I went in. The war was escalating. It was picking up momentum, and I was training at Camp Pendleton out in California. A very mountainous area, very hectic training. We would go on full pack marches for 37 miles up in the mountains. Sometimes I felt that the training would get me before the the war would, the battles. But it was necessary. And one thing I'll say about the Marine Corps, or my experience was, they did wonderful training. We had wonderful leaders. And all my leaders would never do anything, or would never ask us to do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. And so they were good examples. And one of the things they stressed is a camaraderie among the men that were training. I mean, we were literally saving each other's lives. That's what we were doing. And when I left my family. I left my brothers and my sister, and of course my parents. And so all the men that I trained with and went over into combat with became just like my relatives. They were my brothers then.
Where did you go again?
Well, we went to the Hawaiian Islands. We had a base in Hawaiian Islands, and done some more training, of course. We were training continually. And then from there, we went to the Kwajalein Atoll, and it was actually two islands. Roy Namur. When the tide came in, it became two islands. When it went out, it was one island. And the program there was to capture an airfield and get control of that. We had that taken in probably 3 to 4 days. Very intense. We lost a lot of men for such a small place. And then from there, we went back to the island of Maui, where we had a training base, and picked up more men and more training. And then we went to the island of Saipan, which was a larger island. It took us a lot longer to take that island. We lost quite a few men there. Matter of fact, I think I can tell you here. We lost 5,981 men in 30 days, casualties. And then from there, we went a short distance from that island to an island called Tinian. And we captured that island. And we had lost 1,906 men in that operation. From there, we went back to our training area in Maui and Hawaii. And from there, we went to Iwo Jima, which most everybody thinks that's the only place the Marines have ever been. but anyway, we had 9,998 casualties there, and actually there were 6,821 Marines that were killed in that battle. It was probably one of the toughest pieces of warfare for a short period of time. Our warfare was a little bit different than the European theaters and the way they operated, because we were hit them hard and fast and get control of the high ground and move on. That was our tactics. But the reason why we lost so many men, because we were all exposed. Our enemy was dug in, and we were exposed. But that's the way what we were trained for. So we can thank the Lord that we come out like we did. Oh yeah, I had a special friend. He and I trained together, and we fought in all these battles together. And believe it or not, on the island of Iwo Jima, we were wounded at the same time, in the same foxhole, by the same shell. And I had lost contact with him, of course, when we were mustered out, that is, when we left the Corps. And I thought, well, I tried to contact him, couldn't find him anyplace. And 55 years later, I met him in Washington at a Marine reunion. And like I say, it was just like part of my family, because you never know for sure what happened to them or whether they were still alive or not. And let me say this. When you're in combat like that, the only thing you know that's going on is just what's around you. You don't know whether you're winning the war. You know if you're winning your battle, but you don't know whether you're winning the war or not. You don't know what's going on. So if it wasn't for the training and learning how to take orders and move ahead and do what you're supposed to do, it would have been a lot tougher. But many years later, they had formed a 4th Marine Division reunion organization, and so we meet every year, and our company meets once a year. And of course, right now, the people are getting far and few between. We're getting pretty old. I'm 82 going on 83, and I didn't think I'd ever see 25, to tell you the truth. But I had a lot of close calls. I can remember one time I was digging a foxhole on, I believe it was the island of Iwo Jima, and I was in the open. Of course, everybody was in the open on that island. And as I raised my shovel full of sand like this, a sniper shot the shovel right out of my hand, you know. And when I got hit, I feel that this is a miracle in itself. This friend of mine, we were in a foxhole, and they were shelling us pretty heavy. And I thought, hey, my head's up too high above this hot foxhole. So I took my shovel and I shoveled down the seat that I had made in dirt, out of the dirt, to where my eyes was just over the foxhole. I hadn't any more than sit down, and the shell went off. I got hit, and it hit me in my metal helmet here, and went through the metal part and over the inner liner that sits on your head. And I'd gotten some small pieces of shrapnel inside the face. That's where I was wounded on the U-boat. But if I wouldn't have dug down that much farther, it had caught me right here, that big piece of shrapnel. I think it's a miracle. If you believe in miracles.
What was your good friend's name, though?
Davis, Gene Davis. Genedavis. Now, I had a lot of other good friends, but he was a particular buddy of mine. My early combat life, I was a group leader, and by the time I got to Saipan and Tinian and those places, and after I'd had some experience, we became what we call fire group leaders. And then if you were needed, if the squad leader was killed, well, you took over his job. And so we were told by our colonels that we would have to be able to take over a whole company if it was necessary, and we better be ready. So a company of men is an average of 240. By the time we get done with these battles, we'd have maybe 45 left or 42 left. So you lost a lot of men, and we lost a lot of officers. Because our officers, they were really leaders. They get up and move, and they set the example. And so those are things that are pretty hard to forget. Yes. You never slept at night, even if you had a chance. And we would be on forced marches during the day, and you could walk with your eyes shut. And sleep was kind of rare. So the only time I really got any rest is when I went into the hospital the last time. And then they kept waking me up to see if I was all right. But anyway, I'm happy to be alive. And so the real heroes are the ones that's over there yet. I never considered myself being a hero. I'm very fortunate just to be alive.
What about your clothes,
The
though?
clothes? Okay. Well, we had what we called leggings that we wore over combat pants, camouflaged helmets, and jackets. We usually would go ashore with a small combat pack, which we would drop as soon as we could, and we'd take what we call it was a small food pack, and stick it in our back pocket, and on we go, because we needed to be as light as we could. There was a food bar. There was a little carton of cheese, and sometimes bacon or ham mixed in it, very small. They were just emergency food rations. If we were able to get back from the front lines for any reason, they had what they call sea rations, which was larger and they had more things to eat. When I first went in to combat, I weighed about 180. They had me working in the mess hall for 2 weeks. And when I come out, I weighed about 146. So we didn't do a whole lot of eating in combat. I was worried that they were worried about me, because, now this is kind of a little joke if you don't mind. Believe it or not, they had us believing we were bulletproof. But we weren't. But I always worried about my mother and dad worrying about me. I thought my last battle, if this isn't my last battle, the odds are going to be against me. There's no way I can get out. But there was some people that lived. Matter of fact, to give you an idea here, the division I was in had about 18,500 men, and the total casualties from the division was 17,722. That's a lot of men, either dead or crippled for life or injured, period.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
What I was doing? Well, in my little hometown, they had a little soda fountain up there where you could get a Coke for a nickel. And I was walking up to go to that place. And somebody said, "Did you hear what happened?" And it was a shock to me, like it was everybody else. And so when I found out why, I got to the nearest radio like everybody else, and they were listening to what was happening. Yeah, I was in danger. I probably was in danger at times I didn't even know I was in danger. I mean, bullets flew over there on those islands like rain. And I probably had a lot of close calls I didn't even realize I had. And when you first go into combat, hey, you'd be a fool for not being afraid. Matter of fact, if you're not afraid, you'll get careless. And we were afraid, believe it or not. But as you have more combat experience, you begin to be able to handle it and think a little bit clearer and do your job better, of course. I was a very young man, of course, when I went in, and I had seen a movie called The Shores of Tripoli. I said, that's the outfit I want to be in. They had beautiful blue and red and white uniforms. I said, that's the outfit I want to be in. And then when I got in, I thought, what am I doing? What did I make a decision like this for? Because I could sense the danger in the head. This might be the end of my life. But as the longer I was in, I changed my mind about the war and dying and everything else. And I was glad that the war was being fought over there. Because if it was fought over here, you and I probably would be speaking Japanese, believe it or not. And it wouldn't be like it is today. I was injured twice. On the island of Saipan, I was going up a hill with some men, and down below there was what we called a pillbox. It was a cement block house. It stood about that far above the ground and had little slits in it for machine guns. And so we had a demolition squad that was going to blow that block house up. And we were glad they were going to do it. One thing they didn't know, that it was full of ammunition, torpedoes and everything else. And when that blew up, it just rained rocks for, it seemed like, for hours. Of course, it wasn't that long. And I can remember putting my arms up like this, and I'd got hit on the arm with a big block of cement that paralyzed my arm for a while. I went back to what they call a field hospital. And they said, well, do you want to go aboard ship, or what do you want to do? And right then I wanted to be with my unit, because they didn't have many men left. So I went back to my unit. The second time I was wounded was on Iwo Jima, and I wasn't wounded seriously. However, I had problems with the concussion more than I did the shrapnel that cut my face. And so they had me back at the hospital about 3 days, and then I had a choice of going back up or going to the hospital ship. And so I went back to my unit, and that night they had what they call a rocket, probably something new for World War II. And they dropped it right in the middle of what was left of our company. Now, I didn't get hit directly, but the concussion of it really bothered me. And what bothered me most was it was so devastating. The men that was just blown apart. I get body parts was on my clothes and my helmet. And I was sent back. They claimed I had battle fatigue, is what they call it in the Second World War. And from there I went to a hospital ship, and then went into a place in Guam. I was doctored for 2 weeks, and then went to Army hospital because the Navy hospitals were full. And I was eventually discharged from there and came back home. What happened when my time was up? Well, I was thinking about going back home and thinking it was going to be just like it was. And to my surprise, everybody was going practically. All the men my age were either still in the service or in a foreign country or had split up. So it was kind of a shock. I guess what I wanted to really do is live the rest of my life for that 2 or 3 years that I missed. And I suppose a lot of others felt the same way. And so it was time to go to work and earn my living and make plans for my future. It was kind of hard to adapt to society. I really believe they probably let us out too soon. And of course, everybody wanted to get out as soon as they could. But I believe they left us out too soon. They should have been a little more rehabilitation. I was in a hospital for a couple of weeks. But there should have been more time and preparation, so the boys could adjust, because some of them couldn't handle civilian life, and it was hard. I mean, I'm fortunate that I wasn't in the Vietnam War. Those boys weren't appreciated too much over there for what they did. But when you hear things like, well, if it wasn't for you, I still have a job, and things like this, you know, and you had to accept it, reject it, or do something with it. So one thing I found out, life isn't easy, but it's up to you, whatever you want to make it be. Probably the one that was on my mind most of the time was the one on Iwo Jima, where this buddy of mine was wounded at the same time, and just the awesomeness of it, the total fighting, especially on the last island. And when you see your buddies lose their life, and you can't do anything about it, it's kind of hard. You wonder why it's them and not you, and a lot of things, you know, like that. Or it'll be you tomorrow. So these things were the stressful part of it, along with the physical, of course. The Purple Hearts, you had to be wounded in combat, of course. And this simply was to show that you were in the Pacific campaign. And then whatever number of landings, which my jacket would show, they give you a star, which we had 4. And then we had the World War II was just something to recognize the people who were in the service. It was given. And a letter of commendation from the President and one from the Secretary of State. That is a American campaign, so all the campaigns that if there's anybody in the American campaign, they got one. If they didn't, if you didn't serve in that way, you didn't get one. Iwo Jima, they put numerous medals out for that, but it's just to recognize that you were on a particular island. And of course, my division was the 4th Marine Division. This was Ira Hayes. And probably more people heard his name than ever saw his picture. But he was a full-blooded Indian, and from Arizona. And he was one of the 5 that raised the flag on Iwo Jima. And I met him personally in the hospital when I was in the hospital. That's how I got acquainted with him. The discharger shows that I was honorably discharged, and what dates and so on. There's a poster board over there that we used during the war. Did you ever hear the words used, by bonds? Never heard that. Well, this poster was one of many that was used and posted all over different towns, and it took a lot of cooperation and people for us to afford to be able to win a war, and so that's a replica of it, of course. This is a combat knife that the Marines were issued, and became a very popular knife. Matter of fact, it became so popular that all the Westerns, not all the Westerns, that wouldn't be true, but nearly all the Westerns that were made in California with the movies, it used this knife in there. Yeah. And so it was a combat knife. It done a lot of things. It probably opened up more tin cans than anything else. Because they didn't issue a lot of equipment to get those cans open. And very few probably would ever really got in combat with them, because it isn't like the movies. It's either you or him, and you don't play games with knives and talk. This is the literal sand that was on Iwo Jima. And as you see, it's very coarse. And the problem with that is that you couldn't dig down in and get down below the level of the ground to avoid being shelled. It would just, it's like kind of like coffee grounds. See how, it's just about like coffee grounds, and it would it'd just come right back down in the hole. We'd take a shovel out and it would just fill up again. And so we spent a lot of hours laying in the open because we had no other choice. I could say this gentleman here, he was in my platoon, and we were in Florida at the time, and they have these reunions, and this is a write-up of what happened. And we get to talk over old times. This is what your typical Marine during the Second World War looked like. This is what he looked like. He asked, remember when you asked about the clothes and all that? There he was. This is my general, General Vandergrift, and wonderful general, Howlin' Mad Smith, and he really was. I mean, if you didn't do what he told you, he'd get howlin' mad. Oh, here's the island of Iwo Jima. And what we have here is where we landed. Now, there was the 4th Division, the 5th Division, and the 3rd Division.
That's from the sand?
Yeah, that sand is from there, actually, yeah. And this is Mount Suribachi, where the flag was raised. The 5th Division landed over here, and they made a oblique, and they captured that part of the island. The 4th Marine Division went in here, and our objective was to capture that airfield as fast as we could. They thought we was going to do this in 3 days. We found out they were 7 stories underground. And they had shelled that for months. You thought, well, there can't be anybody alive on it. And then when we landed, they came out. And they were looking right down at you. I was in the 4th Marine Division. Actually, I was below the mountain because our objective was to take an airfield, and we went straight in, made a right. 5th Division made a left and went up the mountain, and they secured the top of the mountain. That's where they put the flag up. And the flag business is quite a motivator. And we was all looking for a flag to be up, because that means we had high ground, which is a benefit. And so when we saw that go on, but the war the fighting really had just begun. Then it really began to get tough, because they were in caves, they were 7 stories down under the ground, and they were traveling and tunneled back and forth. They were in front of you, they were among you, they were behind you. And so you didn't sleep. Now let's see, that was a Japanese small tank. They used a lot of small tanks over there. Sometimes they would bury them like this and camouflage them and fire them from that position because it wasn't a wise thing to be moving them around anyway. These people are checking out the landmines, which we had to do quite often. The only thing we do is had little sticks, or we'd have a knife like this, and prod for the landmines. We didn't have the equipment they can have today for that sort of thing. Well, yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, we appreciate your coming. Thank you very much.
And my next reunion, I'll be telling them about it. Because some of the people feel that nobody cares, you know. We didn't do any more than anybody else would do or should do, but I'm glad you're doing this. That's a dog, and they use those sometimes to get the enemy out of caves and so on. This was what they called a field hospital there for wounded that couldn't get aboard ship. These are 2 generals. These are some Marines that are trying to get the enemy out of the caves. And then this is where we land. You see all these little ships? They carried about 36 men. Some of them, you know, they were blown right out of the water. You guys are doing a great job, you know. Really. Asking questions and all that, man, I'll tell you. Maybe I could take them to one of those reunions and their stories, I'll tell you, it'd be interesting to hear.
Just bring the whole reunion.
All right, Grandpa, what do you think?
Okay.
Ready for a good meal?
Just so we don't have to walk.
At least not 37 miles, huh?
Not 37 miles.
They treated the servicemen really, really nice, and a lot of people would take you home for dinners, you know, and there in Chicago, and they were good to you.
And as a sergeant, I had machine guns. Used to be able to take them apart and put them back together blindfolded.
I was in the open. Of course, everybody was in the open on that island. And as I raised my shovel full of sand like this, a sniper shot the shovel right out of my hand.
Hello, I'm Tom Carey. Across our nation, Americans are participating in the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. The mission of this valuable project is to gather first-hand accounts of U.S. veterans from the wars and conflicts of the 20th century. I would like to thank all of the World War II veterans who shared their stories with my 5th grade social studies classes. It is through your eyes that we may vividly experience one of our nation's most difficult times.